Hello, welcome to Arc Studio Presents. I'm Micah Cratty, a WGA screenwriter and the head of writing at Arc Studio, like it says below, and I couldn't write if it wasn't true. Arc Studio is the best screenwriting app in the world. You can check it out at arcstudiopro.com, and there's a link in the description below. In just a moment, I'm going to bring on our special guest, TV writer and showrunner Chris Harris, and we're going to be talking about writing sitcoms. But I want to know, where are you? Where are you watching from? Say hey, get in the chat. It should be fun. And feel free to ask questions in the chat about writing sitcoms or about TV writing in general. We're going to get into some craft discussions. So your questions are welcome and we can get into them. I try to work in as many of them I can as we go. And if we have time at the end, we can answer more. But if you ask a question, I don't get to it right away. Don't worry. I see it. I'll try to get to it. But just, it might not be in the flow of the conversation. Please like this video if you want it. If you want to subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know about future events. And one quick announcement, if you're a screenwriter looking for community and focused writing time, you can join me and about 100 other screenwriters every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for Write With Us. Sorry, not Write With Us. That was what it used to be called. Let's Write Scripts. I need to update this. We do 3 timed writing sprints, and you can make progress on whatever your writing project is. And then in the breaks between, I answer screenwriting questions. We hang out. I show pictures of sandwiches that I made that I love. It's a lot of fun. You can RSVP for that at arcstudiopro.com/events. And there's a link to that also in the chat below. Love seeing everybody in the chat. We've got Columbia, Chicago, Maryland in the house, the International Space Station. That's exciting. I hope your internet connection holds for that. But now please, without any further ado, put your virtual hands together for Chris Harris. Chris, how you doing, man?
Very good. How are you, sir?
I am doing awesome. I am so excited to have you here today to talk about sitcoms and TV writing, hear a little bit about your story, kind of how you got into it, and then also just dig into the craft. So it should be a lot of fun. So for everyone here, if you don't know Chris, he's written for a ton of shows. Recently, he ran the Frasier reboot, and he did Acapulco. Prior to that, he was an executive producer on How I Met Your Mother. He was on that show for a long time. And then way back in the day, he was a writer on The Late Show with David Letterman, which is pretty awesome. But probably his most notable accomplishment, which may not show up on his IMDb, was that Chris gave me my very first job in TV when he hired me as a writer's PA on the short-lived but forever in your heart sitcom, The Goodwin Games. So Chris, thank you for hiring me and giving me my first job. In TV.
I'm sorry it was such a brief experience for your sake, if not for
it was all the sweeter for the brevity. It's like how they say the gods envy mortals because of their brief lifespan. So
there's a lot to envy about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Chris, you have been writing comedy in different forms for a long time. You also write books, like fun rhyming children's books, which is actually I kind of even forgot, which is pretty fun. How did you first get into writing television and in comedy?
Yeah, I got lucky, which and I don't know what the lesson is besides maybe put yourself out there enough so that you can get lucky. But I was after college, I was doing PowerPoint slides for consulting firms for money while I was always writing. And, maybe that was part of that 10,000 hours thing, just getting a lot of, not so great writing out of the way until I found my voice. But I was doing a lot of magazine articles. I had a humor book that I got published that sold about 12 copies, but I was able to use that as a calling card to get other magazine work. And one of my break happened when one of the magazines I wrote for was about the magazine equivalent of the Goodwin Games. Not a very successful magazine, but it had a little bit of a cult following. And among one of the fans was the head writer of Letterman at the time. And once that magazine mercifully folded, and it was the Dave Eggers, the author's first foray into publishing. Once that magazine folded, a couple of us were invited to apply. And he was looking for outside voices that hadn't necessarily written for TV before or worked towards writing for TV. So I was invited to apply. I put together a packet. I quickly caught myself up with as much Letterman as I could, which was tougher at the time because not even TiVo had been invented yet, let alone YouTube. And within about 3 weeks later, I was offered a job, and suddenly I was on a plane and started writing in New York. So very grateful for that opportunity.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, you said something in there that I think is really interesting, and I want to pick up a little bit on. You said you found your voice when it came to writing comedy, and I feel like voice is something we talk about a lot. What do you mean by that?
I mean, I think, you know, I mean, there's a bigger picture, because I feel like every stage I've been at, it has been a matter of working through some of the lower tier ideas or the obvious ideas until I found my own version of that kind of writing that clicked for both me and for others. And I mean that in terms of the stages of my writing. Like there's first magazine writing, then late night writing, and then we'll get into sitcom writing, and even the kids' books that we talked about. You know, there's at Letterman, one of the writers, when I was, you know, about 2 months in, you know, asked me how it was going, and I was like, I can't figure this thing out. And he basically said, "You'll write through it." And I didn't quite know what that meant, but what I think he was getting at is you'll churn through those first pass ideas, and then you'll find things that if not only you can write it, then this is your perspective. This is your angle on things. So that's sort of what I mean. The stuff that's more specific, that you know, for example, like when you recognize a joke or a script or a piece of writing, you say, "Oh, that has to be so and so." That's that voice that we're talking about. Did you
feel like at the start that you were trying to, like, you were doing some sort of imitations of other things? You were trying to do what you think about a joke should be like, or what?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. It was. I mean, writing's always cerebral, but it was almost more, how do I emulate this versus what's really funny, or what's actually making me laugh, because I was new to writing, and you know, I will say Letterman is an incredible experience. It was one of the obviously one of the great highlights of my life was to start working there. It was brutal. It was really tough. It was a boot camp, and they throw you at the time. We were thrown in, and there was a little bit of a sink or swim kind of vibe to it. So by necessity, you had to write a ton, and yeah. But I think that was just all part of the process of finding my voice.
That's awesome. It's funny, the gut thing, I feel like, is so important. I've just noticed a lot in writing, like in being in a writer's room. I always found that the pitches that I thought a lot about went nowhere. They just kind of dropped like lead balloons. But if something just like sparked that was just, this is stupid, but I just like, this is just a thought, like that is the thing that would be like, oh yes. And like any of my contributions that would make it in were those ones that were not like premeditated.
It's funny because the first, like, not even big, but sort of medium success I had on the show. Well, I'll start the first day. First day was amazing. Like I'm walking into the room, and there are some legends there. Jerry Mulligan, some of the faces from the show. This was in the late '90s, so it was.
Yeah, I want to know in the chat. Did you guys? Is Letterman? I don't know how old everyone is here. Did you anyone here actually watch Letterman? Let me know. Let me know in the chat if you guys you even know who we're talking about.
Back in the day,
there
was this thing. It's funny because. I lived through Carson.
You turned the channel like this on your TV with a knob.
Back when TV traveled through So he was the first, like, kind of alternative, for lack of a better word. Oh, good.
At least one viewer.
Yeah. And he was formative. And I'll start even farther back because I feel like, you know, growing up, so much of what talking about voice, so much of what becomes our voice is stuff from way back when, stuff from just those formative years, childhood, preteen, teenage years. And for me, the two things that struck with me in a way where to me, it opened up worlds, were Letterman, because especially watching it at 12:45 at night when I'm already in a sleepy haze, and then he's like, then whatever crazy thing is going on the TV, and you're like, is this actually happening? And similarly was Monty Python to me, where just that sort of absurd, like, I didn't even know you could do that, and breaking the fourth wall and saying, here's what normal people do, or here's what a normal show would do. Let's turn that on its head. And, that informed, I think, a lot of my writing, and it's obviously changed over the years, but, Carter Bay's Craig Thomas, who created How I Met Your Mother, a lot of what we did was, how can we flip this on its head? How can we surprise the audience? My kids' books are like, I had one of my favorite quotes was someone saying it's like Letterman for kids. And I was like, oh, perfect. I've hit the top of the mountain. So that first day was amazing. All these people who had seen on TV for some of them for over a decade. But it was surprisingly, almost corporate more than I thought, because I hadn't really thought of television as, well, of course it's a business. I'd expected like it was going to be Animal House or something like that. Walking into a group of crazy people throwing stuff around. And sometimes it was, but we also had a show to run, a show to create every single day. And there was a business side to it that I didn't expect. Having said that, one of my favorite memories was, ending the day after watching the feed of the show at 6:30 and seeing like, oh my gosh, the top 10 list assignment I contributed to. I got 3 of the items on the top 10 list, and going home that evening and turning on the TV, and at 11:40 at night, seeing on my television something that I had written just a few hours earlier. And it was amazing that it was still one of those like inconceivable, how is this thing that I thought of coming out of the TV back at me now? And it's one of my favorite memories. And one of my least favorite memories was coming in the next morning and realizing that everyone had stayed until 12:30 that night working on other projects, and I hadn't realized that the day didn't end just because the show was over, and I almost got fired on the spot. Fortunately, they kept me around long enough to continue from there.
Oh man, Matt, just getting fired would have been hilarious. Yeah, no, I worked on David Letterman for one day.
It was the stuff of nightmares for years. Oh, sorry, I'll get back to the you mentioned the throwaway idea. So
going from your gut, just like you have an idea pops in your.
And for me, that was a lot of the first 4 months or so was struggling and trying to almost as if in a laboratory. Okay, this has a little bit of a absurdity, a little bit of a celebrity, and it's like trying to manufacture a bit or a gimmick or an idea, and failing at it. And then literally my first medium-ish success, it was a thing called off-screen celebrity cameo, and all it is like David Letterman says, "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time now for an off-screen celebrity cameo." The Chiron flies, off-screen celebrity cameo, music plays, and Dave just, the camera just stays on Dave at his desk. Meanwhile, off-screen, someone walks out onto this, a celebrity walks out onto the stage. So the viewer at home, all they see is Dave just smiling and hearing the crowd go nuts for this person. And then like a hand reaches in, Dave, "Hey, good to see you. How's it going?" And that's it. And Dave never tells the home audience who it is. And I think I almost didn't hand that in because it just seemed so ridiculous. And in retrospect, that was like the first little glimmer of like, oh, okay, that's what Dave likes. That's the feel of the show.
Were there actual celebrities there?
Yeah. Well, and we did it a few times. And we started with the old standbys. Tony Randall, I think, was just like press 1 on the telephone, and he's like, "Yeah, you want to show up today?" And and of course he got that. Everyone loved Tony Randall. And similar with I think it was Regis Philbin the next time. So these classic folks who are always happy to show up on Letterman and do whatever.
That's funny. So you mentioned the trusting the gut thing.
Yeah.
Are there other lessons about writing or comedy writing that you learned at Letterman that kind of have served you throughout your career?
A big one, and this was definitely learning it the hard way. There's always another idea. There's always, you trust yourself that your well is not dry and you're not going to run out of things. And that was a especially tough lesson those first few months, because up until then, I was probably very overly precious about my writing, and it's like, oh, you can't cut that paragraph in that article because that's that, or keeping the list and all these files of different kinds of ideas and things like that. And at Letterman, literally you come in at 9:30 in the morning, and sometimes you don't leave for over 12 hours, and you're just getting assignments, over and over again. New books by this time, game show, funny questions and answers by this time. We need ideas for a live act 1, and this time, and top 10 list comes in, more top 10, more top 10, more top 10. So you're constantly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're not feeling creative that day. It doesn't matter if you think you're out of ideas. That's your job, is to write. And one of the results of that is not worrying about, I'm all out, because over and over again at Letterman, you're not given the choice of being out. And that's, I would say that served me as well as anything else over the years, whether I'm a writer on a staff and the showrunner still doesn't think that we have that right idea for the second episode yet, or when I'm a showrunner and the whether it's a single joke that we said, well, this is an impossible spot. No, it's not impossible. Or we've created a story that we like and the studio hates it, or we've created an outline that the studio likes and we like and the network hates it. Okay, let's adjust it. Or we think this story should be A, somebody else thinks the story should be B. I bet there's a C. I bet there's a C and probably a D and an E and F and a G that we haven't thought of yet. Which is kind of, in a sense, it was this kind of inspiring lesson that was learned just by sheer grueling work. Yeah. But I love it. It's comforting to know that the ideas will keep coming. That's what we do. We're creative. I think that's
an incredibly important thing. I mean, one thing I've noticed, there are a couple things like on that. Sometimes I'll see writers talking about, like, they have like an early script and they're like, okay, but this is kind of a practice script. Yeah. I have this idea. I have this great idea and I want to save it for later, like when I don't want to waste it or something like that. And I love that idea. It's just like, you're going to have another idea. Like, if you hold off, if you wait for you to use your good idea, you're never going to use it. You just do it and then you'll have another one. And,
Yeah. The writer, Jonathan Groff, phrases it as eat the big crabs. Like, you've got big crabs, then eat them. These little crabs will grow big by the time you need more big crabs. Like, so it's just like, you got a great big idea. Don't save it. There are going to be more. It's exactly right. Totally true. And
it's so, and when you do face that thing, like, because sometimes you know it, but you don't necessarily know it. Like, in the moment, it feels like there's nothing else. And it's almost like it's a muscle you have to train. That event, like, the more you do it, the more you believe. Like, and I feel that sometimes, where I think that's one thing that's changed as I've developed as a writer. It's not that I don't get stuck or I don't, like, it's just that I believe more that I'll figure something out, like, it's just that I can do it.
Yeah. And I think you're right that it's, and you're also right. It doesn't mean that you never get stuck. You get stuck plenty of times, but then it's just a matter of like, oh, maybe we need to turn it on its head. Or, I talk a lot about you're doing a crossword puzzle, you get stuck in one corner. Let me go look at this other corner for a while. And then you come back to that corner. It's like, oh, this is obvious. I know this. And I feel like that's writing a lot of times and that's why, tangentially, I always love having multiple projects going on at once, whether that means multiple shows or a show and a book or multiple episodes, or, even different, if I'm writing a script, different scenes in the same script open at the same time, because I find, for myself at least, it's if I get stuck or bogged down in one spot, I'd rather not bang my head against that for an hour. I'd rather like pop over to somewhere else where the writing is easy, and then I'll come back, and somewhere in the back of my mind, it turns out I've been thinking about that scene, just like somewhere in the back of my mind, that crossword puzzle clue has been sitting there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, you kind of answered in part there, but like, that's one of the strategies. It seems like when you do. Are there other things that you do, kind of when you hit that writer's block? Or?
Yeah, the big thing is how do I keep my brain going, but in a different speed or in a different way. And then you have to step away sometimes. Like there's literally just taking a break. I find that if I'm doing a low level activity, even if it's like a computer game or something like that, that's helpful for, like, I'm mindlessly doing this, but I'm actually, and part of my mind is still turning over this thought in the back of my head. So I think the least effective strategy for me is forcing myself to just stare at the same spot on the script until I get it. I feel like that's the toughest part, is it just that sort of straight on thing, for me at least, is much less effective than going around to something else or leaving it alone for a little bit, trusting my subconscious to keep going with it a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny always talking to writers, because I feel like people just have different sort of tasks that they do. There are people who play music. There are people who do like puzzles or build Legos.
Yeah.
There are people who take a walk or a shower.
Do you have like one like go-to?
I like a walk.
Yeah.
I'm a pacer. So
there are a lot of walkers.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of like I've worked with a lot of people who like, okay, we're stuck. Let's take a walk around the lot.
Yeah.
And sometimes as a group, sometimes individually.
And I think kind of tied into that is daydreaming, kind of like I'm a stare into space sometimes person.
Yeah.
Where it's just kind of like, I'll just do that a lot. And then I don't know, just think about like just daydream kind of. And then eventually something's happening in the background. So you're working in late night, where it's kind of be funny, right? Like that's the thing. Was it hard to transition from late night, where it's just be funny, to sitcom writing, which you still have to be funny, but now there's character and story and all these other elements to it?
I don't know if it was a challenge, but to me, the biggest challenge was just going to Letterman, because I think by the time I was moving out to LA and starting to work in sitcoms, I knew that that's what I'd wanted to do. I'd worked on it a little bit. I talked to people who had made that transition. So I sort of, even if there was a long way to go, I at least had an idea of what the hurdles are. And what you said is exactly true, where it's not just jokes anymore. It's characters and it's situations. And for a while, it was easier to translate jokes into here's a funny situation, or here's an interesting situation. And I think the character work and realizing just how important the character is and how much it's more important than anything else, that took longer. And in a way, I heard someone describe it as, at Letterman, we're doing skits, we're doing bits. We're like, here's a funny idea. Like, here's an absurd idea. Here's something that's so ridiculous, we're going to make you laugh. And then the more we're watching, some of the classic half-hour shows, the absurdity isn't here's this absurd idea that we're just throwing into the world. It's really just here's this absurd situation that's absurd because of the character, and we know what they want or the situation that they're in. In other words, like there's plenty of absurdity in real life that we don't need to sort of artificially say, okay, let's put on a Velcro suit and jump into, or whatever, or top 10, I don't know, signs you're in love with Oprah, or whatever the Letterman bit is, that's all really funny and really silly, but it's us imposing. It's just saying, here's a funny thing from outside, where the great comedies, the funny situation is coming from the character itself. And that I think that's probably the thing that took me the longest to really internalize.
I was speaking with another comedy writer recently, Brent Forrester, and he said something along the lines of like, he realized that like the more serious he got, or it got, the funnier it was. And there's something in that, like when you're like true to like the reality of like the character's situation and what they're scared of and what they really want, you know, and all that things, like the funnier it seems to get.
Yeah, exactly. The more they believe in something, it's like, I'm so angry at this person and I'm going to get this out of them. And then suddenly the person says that person X says, "Oh, you're so charming." You're like, "Oh my God, you like me." You know, so like that the more they care about something, the more it's going to be funny when they instantly drop it, because actually what they really want is approval, or whatever the conceit is of the or the situation is in the show. Yeah, that's true. And there's nothing like realizing that it's not people acting goofy or acting funny that's the funniest. It's people acting serious against their best interest, or in a situation where the stakes couldn't be lower, or whatever that is. It's the contrast of the seriousness of the character with the mundanity or the ridiculousness of the situation.
It's interesting sometimes. One of the things I love about sitcoms is I love patterns. Mm-hmm. I love rhythm. Maybe even that's a better word.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're talking about the character, because oftentimes something's funny because it's a surprise, but other times it's funny because exactly what you think is going to happen happens, where it's like, this character, what they're going to do, and you're just waiting for it. And then they do it. And then that's the release where you could just be like, yes, it's a celebration almost.
And I will say that just having been on Frasier, that's to me one of the things that Kelsey is a master at in terms of conveying it to the audience, because there is a moment when he's about to do a 180 because he just got new information, like, they're dating, or he whatever that is, where the information will be put out there, and he will, like, you can like 3 or 4 waves of laughter come out of the audience as you see him sort of hear it first, then process it, then think about what that means, and meanwhile he'll do a small physicality to do it, and that's one of the most delightful things to watch. And it's also like a lesson in this is close to the rhythm thing you're talking about, just the pacing in general, where I think we come in, especially in late night, but when you're I'm going to generalize, I feel like younger writers, myself included, you want that sort of bang bang, you want that, you want airplane and joke a minute, or 10 jokes a minute, or whatever you can pack into. But there's also just something amazing about the one thing that you let play out, and you see there are little micro moments in a single beat that you can play for laughs sometimes. And obviously that's not just the writing, but that's the performance itself that really brings something like that out.
That's awesome. So there's a question here that I think could be a little bit of a bridge towards talking about sitcoms. As someone who's written so much multicam network sitcom, what are your thoughts on the recent dominance of single cam streaming dramedies like The Bear and Hacks? And I think this is one, I just love to get your answer to this, but also two, kind of like, where do you draw the line on sitcom? And sorry, Jessica said, please ignore my typos. So I want to just make sure we catch all of them.
We draw them out, and
someone who's written so much multicam network sitcom. What are your thoughts on the recent dominance single cam? So we're missing a word in there, Jessica. Dominance of single cam streaming comedies. Not that many, actually. I'm not.
I don't know.
I think you did a pretty good job. I was really hoping for more.
I would prefer the next time, Jessica, that you have more typos.
Yeah, really litter them in there, Jessica, so I can have more fun with it. Sorry, but to get back to the question, where do you draw the line on what a comedy or a sitcom is, or do you see like comedy and sitcom as differently?
It's a great question, and there are so many answers and things to talk about around it. There's a big subsection of people, or possibly section of people, who are like, The Bear is not a comedy. The Bear is not a comedy. And I mean, there's a lot of truth to it. The Bear just happens to be a half-hour show. But I think it's not like it's not the Bears' fault. I almost think it's more just like the divisions that used to be very clear are no longer as appropriate as they could be for what TV is like today. It used to be that half-hour shows were comedies and hour-long shows were dramas, and it was very straightforward and very simple. Then reality TV came along, and that started to blur things because it didn't quite fit into either category, and some were half-hour and some were hour, and sometimes they were really funny and sometimes they weren't. And now what we've seen is a further blurring. You have shows that have humor in them, like the Bear, which is a shorter show, and I'm in that other subsection of people who say that some of the funniest television in the last few years have been some of these hour-long shows. I think Succession was one of the funniest shows of this past decade. It didn't always feel that way, and technically it's a serialized drama, but
I always thought the same way, like Breaking Bad. One of the things that separated it from all those other dark anti-hero shows that were kind of trying to be Breaking Bad was how funny it was. You know? And that's such a key ingredient in it.
So to me, it's almost just like the categorizations are at fault here, where the masks, the two masks aren't as separate as they used to be. And we have really funny hour-longs, and we have more dramatic half hours, and we have a lot of stuff that's in between. And
is that exciting to you or scary to you as someone who's written?
For me, that's exciting because my career trajectory has been, individual jokes and bits at Letterman to, 3 or 4 minute long pieces at Letterman to half-hour shows. And the idea to serialized, I've done some serialized half-hour shows where you're talking in terms of a season. And to me, like bringing comedy into hour-longs and stretching out the storytelling is even more exciting. And it's also part of it's also, the way people watch television is not conducive to the classic multicam half hour anymore, or at least, or especially not to new multicam half hours.
So that's so interesting that some of the more successful things on streaming are the older comedies. And
I think one of the best qualities of and I'm not going to be saying anything too groundbreaking here, but one of the qualities that always attracted people to half hours is that familiarity. It's like, I want to sit down with my surrogate TV family and see what they're up to, and I want to laugh because I know that as soon as Raymond's mom says this, they're going to cut to Raymond's brother, and he's not even going to say anything, but I'm going to laugh because I know he's about how he's going to react to that. And we know these characters so well that we love watching them in these situations. And so weirdly, that I think that's why do people still watch Friends now? It's because they've already been watching Friends. like you already have that familiarity. You already have that surrogate family. And it's harder because the economics aren't there, and because of the way people watch streaming TV, it's much more difficult to, you used to be able to put on a show. Some sitcoms were hits out of the gate, but a lot of them hit their stride. How I Met Your Mother is included in their second or third or fourth season because the creators found the rhythm, the actors found the character and the dynamics with the other characters, and the audience got used to seeing these characters, and they grew to understand these characters and love them. It's much tougher when you're doing only 8 or 10 episodes every year and a half. It's also tougher when you're always starting from. So I'm just throwing out all my stuff here, and we can unpack anything if you.
No. This is great. Yeah.
But it's also tough when you watch a streaming show. You're starting at episode 1, and that's a little tougher for the non-serialized multicam, because usually those first few episodes are the ones where the show is finding its footing. Think about the first season of The Office, where Michael Scott had a very different and tougher attitude. Parks and Rec is another one where the first season was famously just a little bit herky-jerky. If everyone always started Parks and Rec or The Office from the first episode of the first season, you might not create that fan base as much as it found by being on broadcast TV when you sit down. Oh, I've heard about The Office, and you just happen to watch season 3, episode 12. It's a very different viewing experience than starting from the beginning and needing to watch through all the people work out the kinks and work out the issues. So those are some of the reasons, and then there's international sales, but we won't get into that.
Well, also, and I think
it's why,
it's important to also mention, just because people are talking about like we're streaming, the model has changed, right? And like multicam sitcoms were great at getting people to watch, but like they're not like exciting necessarily, like buzzy, and so much more of the model like used to be. If you just had a big audience, that was great. That's what you needed. But now for streaming, it is about driving new subscribers.
It's also a great point. There's so many options and so many things to watch, not just the things that are currently being made, but the things that were made last year and the year before and the year before and the year before. They're all available at the same time. And so to break through that, you probably need something more than just, this is about 6 people who are friends in adjoining apartments who are just hanging out in New York. It could work. The right thing could still work, but it's much more difficult. And more effective would be, let's do a driving story, a story that has a drive, or a story that has a hook, and we're gonna get laughs along the way. You do
have those hangout friend shows, but like there was a murder or something that happened as well.
And you probably need that to break through. So, and again, we're seeing the blending of the what were comedy and drama. It's just not as clear cut anymore for the most part. There are a lot of shows that are inhabiting that in between space. Again, I think it's exciting because you get shows that would have been, inconceivable 20 years ago, just because they don't fit into a category. But I think that's the fun part, is to be able to watch a show and to go from horror to laughter to just tense to tension, all of that within the space of a defined amount of time. That's exciting, and as a writer, that's exciting too. I know, Micah, I know you like that sort of combination of elements too, right?
Oh yeah, no, totally. It is liberating. It is. Sometimes I find it is a marketing challenge in some ways when they're like, what exactly is this? But like being able to play with those elements. But I think that's what some of the truly great shows have always done, was they had those moments where they were painting with the full palette of colors. And
it's a great way to describe it. Why limit ourselves to a certain palette? Like let's use all the tools that we have.
All right, I want to dive into craft a little bit, but I think firstly, we actually never got a definition. What is a sitcom? What is a sitcom?
What is a sitcom? A good question. Situation comedy. Typically it's a half-hour show. A lot of times people are referencing sitcoms as, there's a distinction between the multi-camera and the single camra. But
which would be the multi-camera is the live audience kind of show, Friends, Seinfeld,
almost anything from the 80s back is not all is a multicam. And then you have the single camera, which is shot more cinematically.
The Office, for instance, is one of those.
Exactly, Malcolm in the Middle is one. Yeah. So just a little bit more of and then there's the verite, like The Office. And then for the most part, sitcoms have been less serialized. A story begins at the top of the episode and ends at the end of the episode. People, there are dating arcs and there are moving situations and things like that. But for the most part, you can watch a story from beginning to end in a single episode. And that's go ahead.
The situational part, though, of the comedy, in some sense, is that that sort of implies that, like, it's the same situation, kind of, almost every episode, right? Or the same kind of problem or structure or world that, think of, like, The Simpsons, Homer's going to be dumb, Seinfeld, George is going to sabotage him. Like there's these things kind of that it's almost like you're creating a repeating thing, right? Versus like something that's going somewhere.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never actually thought about the word, like how did the word situation work its way into the 2-word term for this genre that I owe a lot of my professional life to. But I think you're right. There does imply like a repetition. It's almost like it's almost like a purgatory of, yep, we're gonna start where this week we're gonna start at the same place that we started the week before and the week before and the week before, and then things are gonna get worse, but then they're gonna get better by the end, and then next week we're gonna start back in the same position. There is an implicit resetting emotionally for most sitcoms.
I was working on a little like TV pilot writing course, which is free on YouTube on the Arc Studio channel. And I was thinking about this in the terms of the idea of like a fundamental disconnect was very helpful for me. And sort of there's a fundamental disconnect between what the character wants and kind of the reality of their world. And so like more recently, Abbott Elementary, like, Janine, she wants to be the best teacher. She wants to help her students, but she's inexperienced and the school's underfunded. And so that's just going to be a problem kind of every week. It's just, there's always going to be that gap, that's going to kind of keep happening. And so you're kind of trying to find what is that thing almost.
Every sitcom character is the coyote. It's just a matter of what their roadrunner is.
Right. So when you're thinking of developing an idea for a sitcom, or just we can say a comedy in general, what do you like to start with? Is it a character, a premise, a world you're interested in?
I mean, honestly, and this is true both for creating a show idea and also if you're in a show thinking about episodes. Some people will swear you have to start with the emotional core. Some people will say you got to start with the big funny idea. I think it can come from any direction, to tell the truth. And in terms of my writing, I'm happy with any idea that I like. No, I don't, I'm not particular about where it comes from. I'm just happy to have it. And thinking about pilots I've done and episodes I've written, sometimes we're like, let's do something that really gets at the fact that this person thinks that they're the same person they were 20 years ago, but they're not. And that's the realization, or these two people keep missing each other. And they're in that cycle, or whatever it is. This person, the dream that they gave up on suddenly comes back to at the when they least expect it. Whatever any of these sort of tropey but sort of universal feelings. I think I don't know. I feel like they can come from any direction, basically. I don't think there's a right answer. I think more and more these days, as we were talking about, if you're looking for something that's going to break through all of the barriers or get through all of the hoops, you do need that. That splashy idea is really helpful. I haven't read about the origins of Severance, but like there's an idea that okay, there's a great concrete idea, and you can almost feel the emotional stuff come out of that idea. Like what's natural with this you have this idea that the work life and the separation of work and home, what if it's really a thing and you're actually two different people? Okay, what would that do? What kind of person would exist in that world? What kind of stories would be really interesting? I feel like you can build the emotions from the high concept idea sometimes.
Is there, writers have lots of ideas. Some are good, some are bad. Are there any characteristics you think like they're like, oh, this one's worth pursuing? Like, how do you sometimes know, like, if it has legs as an expression, or like, yes, like is it just an excitement you feel, or are there actual kind of analytical characteristics of those kind of ideas?
Yeah, I don't know if analytics definitely. I don't know if there is. My favorite moments with characters are those characters where I haven't necessarily seen, and this is as a viewer, for example, like a character that I don't know if I've seen this character before, but I know that guy. Like, I know that type of person. Like the and I have a friend who does a lot of pitching who loves to sort of find those super simple ways to start. Like, she's the kind of person who slows down at green lights. Okay, I know that kind of person. Carter and Craig, I feel like, when they came up with Barney as a character, it's like, oh, I know that guy. He talks a big talk. I'm going to teach you how to live and everything. I'm going to take, the person who needs to be the mentor to someone else in order to make himself feel great. It's like, oh, I've had friends like that over the years. I feel like if you can tap into that familiarity, but the familiarity in real life, but not necessarily as familiar on the screen, then you've got something really special there. And those are tough to find. But I think they are they're the things that attract us most to a character.
When you have that idea of a character, how do you build from almost a type or not necessarily a trope, but maybe a type of that the person who would do this to a fully fledged kind of human being,
Yeah. I mean, one of the things you mentioned is one of the starting points, which is, what do they want? There's that classic, what do they want versus what do they need? What's the gap between those two things? Is there a way where they don't get what they want in the pilot, but they take a step forward toward what they need, whether they know it or not? Those are sort of the building blocks of a character that you're starting out on a journey that could go 6 episodes or it could go 200, depending on what your story is. I think finding the contrasts, finding the ways that you okay, here's the stock character, but also this. That's why you see characters. I can't think of the right example off the top of my head, but the character who has this very specific hobby. Those are such great details where you say, oh yeah, he's a blowhard, but he also really cares about his Hummel figure collection, or he's a nerd, but he's obsessed with I don't know, whatever activity or something. So I feel like those are the, don't be afraid of, sometimes something can feel like, well, this doesn't make sense for the character because they're the opposites. But if you really know the character, then embodying those contrasts and those paradoxes within the character will make it actually feel more real. And then, I think when you're building out your show and your world, it's very easy to think about, okay, this is the main character and that person is the hub and all these other characters are spokes, and how they affect him. And obviously that's very important, but it also is really helpful to think about how do the spokes interact. Hopefully that's not too broad, too vague, but what does his wife think about his younger brother who lives in the back? Like start filling out, drawing other lines in the world, not just to the main character. And I feel like those are good ways of fleshing out a character and taking, whether it's the main character or side character, taking them from one-dimensional or two-dimensional and making them feel like a fully fleshed out character.
I think it's challenging because you talked about maybe they don't change in the pilot, but they take a step towards something. But in a sitcom, your character can't grow, or at least they can't grow very fast.
No, right? They take the same step forward over
and over again. So how do you? I don't know that. I don't think there's an easy answer to this, but how do you make that a feature, not a bug? Basically, is there something about those kind of characters that the audience is willing to go on the same journey with them over and over again.
It's tricky because if you do it too much, then it's going to feel frustrating where the characters don't grow. And the truth is, even older sitcoms, there is, and I think this is good, there is a bit of a warmth that usually creeps in between or among the characters. Usually the attitudes in the first season, especially in the first few episodes, are much harsher than they are in later seasons. Take Carla at Cheers, for example, like just coming out of the gate, just bam, 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 and still never loses that sharpness. But there's fond, I as a viewer felt much more fondness coming from her for the people in the bar than I necessarily remember in earlier seasons. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I also think we're in an era where we might want a little bit more of that. So this is a long-winded way of saying, we say that sitcom characters don't change. I think they can. I think there is room for progression in sitcoms these days, and I think I think one of the joys of the first season or so of a half-hour show is let's take this character over here and this regular character over here. We haven't done a story that pairs the two of them yet. What are they going to have to talk about with each other? I remember it took us forever on How I Met Your Mother before Robin and Marshall had a story with each other. And we realized that deep into the season, it's like, oh my God, what do these two have to say to each other? Well, they have very huge differences of opinion in terms of love and romance and very different experiences. Let's use that because it's really interesting. And they probably have some things. They probably have wisdom for each other. They probably have things to convey to each other. And there's probably a little bit of a closeness, just a tiny bit, that you might feel in episodes after that episode versus ones before. But you're right that it's almost, if you're ultimately starting from, if not zero, then close to it, every episode on a classic multicam sitcom, especially. It's almost like you find, different new ways of telling similar stories, and it's like, thinking of Frasier, for example. There are plenty of stories about how Frasier and his father were not close, or were different people. And on the newer Frasier, we sort of conveyed that into Frasier and his son. But there are lots and lots of different stories, specific versions of that story. It can be about, I never understood you at work, or I never understood, there was always you didn't pay enough attention to me during this time. So there are ways to tell, there are themes that are repeating, but hopefully the stories don't repeat necessarily.
It's interesting, as you were saying that, I was just kind of thinking how, like, I think sitcoms have this reputation for sort of being more contrived than dramas. They're zanier. These are like, okay, they're in these weird shenanigans. This isn't real. But like, in some ways, they're more true to life, in the sense that, like, if you think about your family gathering,
yeah,
it's the same kind of jokes, and like, you did this like generations across, or like your weird coworker is just going to be your weird coworker kind of the whole time. Like, they're not everyone's going on these journeys all the time. Like, sometimes people, it's just like, it's more honest and a reflection of life, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And there's something, it's funny because I feel like sitcoms aren't necessarily broader than single cams, but there's a feeling of broadness. And I think that's more the nature of the format, more than it, because you feel the falseness. You know that you're watching a stage play. You know that you're watching people on a stage perform, much more than a single camera where it feels like you're in the action, or you're on location. And because of that, I think things that might ring a little bit false sometimes ring very false. And sometimes things that seem a little bit broad might seem very broad. And I don't have great examples, but I feel, one of my favorite shows from, the early 2000s, I think, was 30 Rock. 30 Rock was bonkers. And it was great. Arrested Development, one of my favorite shows, bonkers. It was great, broader than anything than, I wouldn't say that, but sometimes, puns and insane flashbacks to things that could never exist. You do that on a multicam and you'd be like, what is this stuff? And I just feel like that, and that's not to, I love both of those formats. I just think that different things ring differently depending on the format itself.
Before we move off characters, I wanted to ask, it's weird. There's this, it seems like almost like there's two types of comedies. There's the type where the protagonist is the funny one, kind of, and then there's the type where the protagonist is sort of the normal one, and they're surrounded by craziness.
Yeah.
Is that like, do you think at all in terms of that? Like, is my, like, okay, in this, like, it's an audience stand-in experiencing a crazy world versus, you think about like Michael Bluth sort of being kind of normal, and you're laughing more at what his family does than what he is doing. Or Ted Mosby in How I Met Your Mother is more a little bit, I mean, he does his things, he's funny, but like, he's not Barney doing his crazy kind of
right. Yeah, he's the eye of the storm.
Yeah.
And the way in for the audience too.
Sure.
Like that's our eyes into the show.
So do you have to limit sometimes how funny your protagonist is, or zany or weird they are, in order for the audience to have kind of a way into your show?
I'm trying to think what would be an example of the opposite in because I'm trying to think of the right character.
I feel like I had one, but like most of them are,
I feel like almost the standard. I feel like that might be the standard, whether it's single or multi. Where I'm this is my first day on the job, and here I am taking in all these crazy. Yeah,
because The Office, you have like Jim is kind of the normal one, even though he does his pranks. You have Jerry Seinfeld, even though he's the comedian, he's sort of usually the more normal, so I feel like that is kind of the
I wonder if there's a good
this is interesting, actually. This is tying back in the first season of Parks. Leslie Knope was more the weird one, and then they kind of, I feel like, toned her character down a little bit more and made her, I mean, she was still Leslie Knope, that's kind of
interesting though. Was there a I can't remember. Was there a Jim equivalent for us? Because you're right.
There was that love interest guy who got cut from the show.
Right. What's his? Yes.
I'm blanking on his name.
I'm blanking on his name too.
He was like the city planner or something.
Yeah, and then went off So it's not necessarily.
So the old stuff with like Robin Williams. Like he was kind of crazy. Was he more? That was before my time. Like, was he the main character or the
in Mork and Mindy?
Mork and Mindy, yeah. I guess that's like back in the day.
Maybe the point is because then.
Oh, Lucy! I love Lucy. She was the wild one.
That might be our best example. Not in that, because I feel like what we're stumbling on is that there is always a sane person either at the center or next to the center,
or reacting to
who's basically the way in for the audience. Although Lucy, I'm not sure really had that centering, that sort of grounded person letting the audience in on it.
I guess Ricky was always like, what are you doing? Like, oh my gosh, it was kind of like the audience saying the thing the audience. Anyways, I don't know if there's any great insights here into writing, but just maybe thinking about that, if you're working on a comedy, on like who is kind of the one grounding the situation, being the audience is kind of way in to this. Maybe that's kind of the applicable lesson here. In terms. And you also just mentioned briefly, I want to like on the ensemble, like you mentioned the web of characters. So you have your kind of your protagonist in the middle, and then the spokes of the wheel. What do those characters need to do? I like to think of them as supporting characters instead of minding characters, because they're there to support. They have a job, what is their job, kind of?
Well, it's different in a pilot versus a series, and I think that's where a lot of people sort of, that's where there can be a lot of confusion going from one to the other. In the pilot, a lot of times you don't have, like, you have such a short amount of time. You really want to land your main character, and that's the most important thing, or your main couple, whatever that story is. You really want to land your central characters and their relationships. It doesn't give you a lot of time for the wacky friend, or the stern father-in-law, or the precocious kid. You're almost limited to, two-dimensional at best. And so when you go to series, there's usually some thinking to do in terms of, what is this character's purpose? And can you basically giving more to that character, and again, getting back to what they want, what they need, what their Achilles heel is, what their flaw, what they can't resist, what gets them irrationally angry. All of these things that are true to the best characters, or all these ways to think about and flesh out the best characters. Usually that's stuff that maybe it's in a pitch document somewhere, but a lot of times you're figuring that out. And then the other sort of thing I'll mention about in this topic is, one thing I think writers learn working in TV is, like, you can have your exact vision you can know exactly who each character is, and you can have written your Bible out for 12 seasons, and every single episode, what's going to happen. As soon as you cast your show, the character is owned by the actor. And what I mean is, the person who's embodying that character, the person who's conveying that character, is inevitably going to be different in certain ways than what you pictured. And some of the most successful pilots I've been on are ones where someone has been cast and they say, let's adjust. And some of the least successful ones are where you cast a person who's 30 degrees off from what's on the script, and you insist that actor match the character instead of writing the character to the actor. And I think that you discover things. Carter and Craig talk about how Barney was originally, not necessarily as well put together, and maybe was a little out of shape, and sort of was much more of much more talking the talk and much less walking the walk than Neil Patrick Harris, who came in and had an energy and an enthusiasm that they couldn't resist. And they realized, this is a interesting character. He's just got as much ego and boasting as we thought about, but he actually might be a player. And maybe that's interesting too. When he says, "I got to teach you how to live," he's really there's a little bit more truth to it too. And I think that that character broke out because they were able to say, "Hey, let's adjust what was always in our heads, and let's write this character to fit the person portraying it now." So, long way of saying, as you go forward from the first episode, that's one of the first things most writers' rooms I've been in do is, like, let's talk about each character, let's flesh out each character, because this person only had 8 lines in the pilot, and most of those lines were, "How can you do that? That's not right." Just non-character things. So there will be hopefully you have an idea when you're writing your pilot or your spec about these characters, because if you have an idea, then that'll come through on the page. But if you get to take something and actually write it and shoot it, I think there's always a little bit of stepping back and saying, okay, what do we have now? What worked in the pilot? What didn't? What relationships did people love, and what relationships felt false or felt uncomfortable that we want to adjust? All of that's going to go into the series as a whole.
That's awesome. There's another element of sitcoms that I wanted to ask you about, which is really interesting, which is that they're notorious for being associated with a place, right? There's McLaren's Pub in How I Met Your Mother, the coffee shop in Seinfeld, Central Perk in Fred. There's a very practical thing here where it's like, well, they just can't be in their apartment the whole time. They need to be somewhere else. Is there Are there other elements to like a good place, a good kind of hangout for your character?
It's like most of the time, on shows that I've been a part of starting up, there's that urge for that public place, and one reason is it's nice to get them out of the house. It's nice to get out of the house, and the second reason is anything can happen in there.
Anyone can show up. Anyone can walk.
Anyone can show up. Dating stories. If it's that kind of show, you've got a cafe or a bar or something like that is great. Anyone can walk into a diner. Anyone can know that someone works there, and stop by and deliver a summons, or you run into your college sweetheart or whatever. It just helps, because otherwise you're building that equivalent of a set each episode in order to kick off whatever the story is a lot of the time. Now there are plenty of shows that somehow, I don't know why I'm thinking of Sanford and Son, but I feel like they were just always in the junkyard, and they almost never left. Shows can do it.
But it's usually a bar or a coffee shop, I feel like.
That's where else, I guess, is the answer. You could do it at a more specific place, but then unless that's what the show is about, does the I don't know, it's a dry cleaner. You can do it, but then it just starts to feel weird that everyone's coming into the dry cleaners all the time, or the set overwhelms the story. A bar, another nice thing about a bar or coffee shop, it's just there. No one's questioning it. And it lets the story and the characters, take up our attention.
I think it also does a lot of work in terms of world building and tone, almost like just thinking of the different kinds of coffee shops, like Central Perk and Friends, and like they're just kind of slouched on these giant couches, and like that kind of atmosphere, versus in the original Frasier, was it Cafe Nervosa, which was the hoity-toity, uptight espresso bar, kind of thing, where it was like very, like, I would imagine at that time, like to much of the country being like, what is this? Like before Starbucks, kind of,
Yeah, it was
a rare thing. Yeah. And even like the different kind of bars, like very much reflecting the vibe, kind of.
Is it an Irish pub? Is it a cool wine bar? Yeah, there are. You can absolutely convey some tone and some feel just by that location itself. Yeah, definitely.
It's interesting. Jessica was mentioning like these third, like it's weird that these sitcoms have these, because these third places are so important. Like, and I don't know, it's just important. Like, I hope everyone in their own life kind of has these places, but like I've noticed that it's so, I don't know, there is sort of the diminishing thing about life, that there's almost something nostalgic about them in sitcoms, because it does really seem people are not going out as much.
Because it's less true in the real world.
Yeah.
Is it becoming more of an obvious crutch, or is it standing out more in a sitcom? It's a great point. It's a good question. Like, what would Friends or How I Met Your Mother, what would, because at some point that next iteration will come up. Are we looking at a different location, or are we not looking at a public place in the next version of whatever that show is?
It's a Zoom hangout. It's just,
oh God,
on screen.
It's a good question. I haven't had that situation where we're addressing it directly like that, but the original Frasier and Friends and How I Met Your Mother, all those hangouts, like you were saying, Micah, they're true to the world of the characters and to the time that the stories are taking place. I don't know if I'm an expert on what would be the right thing for a group of people in their 20s right now, but I think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people always have things, whether it's, I don't know, like a sports league or something, people do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
A laundromat is a good one, depending on, where you are. We've been talking for a while, but I want to talk a little bit about like story building, which is always so important. So, like we've talked about that these sitcoms are episodic. The journey kind of ends at the end. How do you tell which is kind of always funny that like serialized shows have they're longer episodes and you're only telling part of the story, whereas a sitcom is half hour and you're telling a whole story.
Yeah.
So how do you tell a full satisfying story in 30 minutes?
It's brutal. And I'll say that one of the few, but one of the benefits of the newer Frasier being on Paramount Plus was that we did get to go beyond the traditional broadcast, whatever it is now, 20 minutes and 30 seconds or something like that, which is
with commercials. Yeah. That's the whole thing. Half-hour sitcoms were actually like 22 minutes. Like they were
a third of that is commercials and promos and black frame and all sorts of stuff. So it is really tough to start and end a story, especially because, as we were talking about before, sometimes the funniest moments are the spaces in between the lines, and sometimes the funniest way to show this situation is to just let it play out in all of its excruciating length. And especially on How I Met Your Mother, where we always packed in way too much story, we almost always had to rely on more of a bam, bam, bam kind of rhythm to the jokes and to the scenes and to the flashbacks. And we were just never able to get ourselves into a situation where let's try to underbreak a story so that we can just let this scene breathe and be with the person as this lands on them, whether it's something really funny or something really emotional. Like we tried to, the emotion is more important ultimately, because if you don't laugh, another joke is coming. But if the emotional point of the show, of the episode, isn't landing, then you have a problem.
So to get back, how do you do it then? It's hard, but how do you get to the emotional point in that limited time? Are there certain structural things that you're like, I need to hit this by this act break, or how do you approach it?
Yeah, I mean, you need to start things fast, and it helps to, if you're going to take shortcuts, or you're going to fudge something because you're compressed for time. What I've learned over the years is do it early, like take the medicine early. That's also true, by the way, for if there's I don't know, for whatever you need to set up. I'd rather get that out fast and then let the rest of the scene play and the rest of the episode play at the regular pace. But it's tough, because you used to be able to do, back, decades ago, you almost had time for an extra beat in your stories compared to now. And it doesn't help by the fact that, I'll rephrase it. One thing we've done on, How I Met Your Mother had always had an A story, a B story, sometimes a C story. If your
main storyline, a secondary storyline, and then maybe a tertiary kind of.
Exactly. And I feel like one difference that I've been on in shows since then is embracing an A story, where maybe, if you've got 6 or 7 regular cast members, maybe not every single one of them needs to have an arc in every episode. Maybe this person just has one great big scene, and that's their moment in this episode, versus trying to squeeze in an A story and a B story and a runner. So that's one thing, is sort of finding one main story to carry us through versus two stories that both have multiple beats. It was easier on Frasier, for example, because our main character was Frasier. Our main character is the title. Everyone else is a regular and is important, but again, he's the hub, and everyone else is ultimately, not in every specific episode, but ultimately in service of this character. So that show, for example, it was easier to say, let's do one A story that everyone flows in and out of, and there are runners and everything. But and that's one way, for example, to give yourself the time. But you don't have time for you definitely in a half hour don't have time for well, this scene isn't necessary, but it looks fun. Or this is a character building scene. You have to do, and this Rand, I know Chuck Lorre is famous for saying every scene you have to do just one thing, but I don't think that's necessarily true. If you want to show this side of a character in your episode, then you've got to do it while also advancing the plot from A to B. And that can make scenes really fun because that means you've got whatever the main drive going on, but also you want to see that this character is jealous of this other character. You're trying to constantly kill two birds with one stone. One of those birds, to torture this metaphor, is laughing, is comedy. So you need to get from A to B, and you need to laugh along the way, or you need to be entertaining along the way, because you don't have time in 20 minutes or 22 minutes to do one and then do the other.
How much are you thinking of, speaking of the laughing, how much are you thinking of the comedy during the story phase versus, in the script, writing the joke kind of on the page? Are you thinking about comedy the entire time, or are you saving that more for the draft?
It's wonderful if you're doing both at the same time, because I think the best comedy, if you're saving it for the draft, you'll find the jokes and you'll find the comedy, but it might mean that it's not coming from the character in the situation as much. And I feel like that's the best. That's the stuff that, at least for me, makes me laugh the hardest. Is I'm laughing because this character is in the exact situation that he spent the last 12 minutes trying to avoid, and he did it because he of his own hubris or whatever. There are definitely sometimes like where it's like, this is a long, serious scene where this person is finally, the mom's finally telling the son what she thinks of him, and or whatever that is, or there's going to be some big emotional thing, and then like, oh, we need something to break the tension here, or this is, these are two friends talking about how their friendship has changed over the years. So it's serious, but it's not super serious. We need a third person over here who's, got their head stuck in something to just sort of like, to just keep the laughter going as we're doing it. So there are ways where you can add laughter to scenes, but definitely in the last few episodes I've been in, like, can we find what's inherently funny in the situation versus can we add humor to the scene that we already know we have to write.
That's awesome. Chris, how are you doing on time? You have a chance to answer some more audience.
I got a few minutes.
Let's get some audience questions here. I think this is an interesting question. How do I write sitcoms or comedy shows if I'm not funny? People around me have a sense of humor, but I do not. Well, I have to say, Ryan, this is funny. It's a funny question. Yeah, I mean, I would say my initial answer is you don't have to write comedy if you don't want to. There are all different types of writing. I think even in dramatic writing, you can find room for humor, and we were talking about that anywhere, just like through characters reacting almost honestly to what they want, or but there's room for comedy. But I guess like you don't have to write comedy if that's not your natural style.
Yeah, I think the wonderful thing about TV writing right now is you can write half hours and you can write something that's more dramatic. The world is open in terms of that. So, and I think Micah makes a great point where you might end up finding the comedy in the dramatic, cut the green wire. I'm colorblind. Why didn't you tell me before you went in to defuse the bomb? Whatever that is. You might find the humor in that tense situation, but I think starting out with writing what you're most comfortable with is always the best starting point. Yeah,
and what you were talking about finding your voice earlier, that doesn't apply to just comedy, like your comedic voice. That's all kinds of writing. As a dramatic writer, whatever it is, whatever your focus is, you want to find what your voice is. So this was a question asked way back at the beginning. Thanks for hosting this conversation. Graduated last year at the MFA, writing, producing, struggling to find the inroad to breaking in. Like so many, I do anything for writer's PA position, be staffed one day, but I'm struggling to get my foot in the door. Yeah. I have a strong pilot under my belt. I'm applying to fellowships, place competitions, but what else can I be doing? I'm feeling lost. Would love to hear your thoughts. Chris, what kind of advice do you have for writers trying to break in?
First of all, I sympathize. It is tough. Like that, like I don't think there's an easy solution. But it's tough, and I'm as I hear stories like that, I am super grateful that I was able to get in and have been able to carve out the career that I have. There are a lot of talented writers here, especially because we are still in this contraction. There are more talented writers than there are positions, and that's kind of one of the tough spots about this industry right now. Some things that I think, some pieces of advice that I unfortunately are vague, and Micah, I'm sure you can speak to this too. I think keep reaching out, keep writing is the most important thing. Keep reaching out, find the connections that you can. I think people who find writing, like I think it's easier to find other like-minded people or people in the position that you are. And I know that even back when I was starting out and friends were starting out, those groups that you form as you're just entering, you'll be surprised at how often one person hears about a PA job and gets a PA job, and then they're able to let this group know, oh, we're hiring someone else, come on in. So the more, like, don't worry about, like, reach out on your level, and don't worry about reaching up as much too. Yeah. Because that's going to be important in the medium and long term, even if it's not as helpful in the short term.
Yeah. A couple of things I'll just jump in to say, that's the idea. Networking ladder, like that's the thing. Like you're going to go through the wars together. You have to think long term in this, basically. Yeah. But I can give an example because, as I said earlier, Chris hired me on my first job in TV, and so like I could say like how that happened was I found Chris's email address in an alumni database. We went to the same college. We didn't know each other, but I just found him and I emailed a bunch of people. Chris emailed me back. He was very nice. And then we had a phone call, and on that phone call, I mean, I don't know, like I'm trying to think of how like strategic I was on it, but like I basically tried to be enthusiastic and not a pain. I wasn't like, if you have an opportunity, don't ask. Like I didn't ask for a job. I didn't ask him to read my script or anything like that. I just asked questions and advice and tell me about your, that kind of a thing. And then the big thing was I moved to LA and I was here, and then I think we met up for coffee, and then it was kind of like, and I was like, oh, I like this guy. He likes me. Like, and then you can kind of chat more but then I think several years passed before, the job happened.
Yeah.
And I, to be honest, found myself struggling at times to be like, I need Chris to remember who I am. How can I email him or something? Man. Just like, I have to try to keep this. And sometimes it's a struggle. It's hilarious.
All the stars to hitch your wagon to. You picked me, man. I don't know.
But anyways, but then I was just kind of like, I tried to be cool about it and be like a nice person. And like, and you see an article in Deadline and be like, Chris, congrats, blah, blah. And then finally he created the show, The Goodwin Games. And there was like an opportunity there. And then again, this is years later. And like, it only kind of worked though, because, and this is like the bigger point I'm also trying to get to, is that because like I liked Chris and Chris liked me and there was like and so it's like, try to build honest relationships. Like if I thought Chris was a piece of crap, the entire time, and I was just like doing this just because I thought there was a job there, Chris, like you can smell that. Like it would have, like, you can tell if people are trying to use you, I would say. So like building honest relationships with people that you like and you want to work with is like the best long-term strategy. Trying to be really like, people can just tell if you're trying to, just get something out of them.
I think that's maybe the most important point. I'll also add, I think you just graduated with MFA. You've got time. I didn't start at Letterman until I was 28. I didn't move out to LA until I was 32. So it didn't get staffed on a show until then. So, you've got time, and what's going to make you interesting at 28 and 32 and 36 and 40 is also not necessarily working to try to be in TV right now. Like what are like some of the people take all sorts of routes into television and film, and so it's sort of like a much bigger sort of existential version of the crossword puzzle I was talking about. If you're banging a head against this TV wall, think about something else. What else is there in the world? And then you can come back to this in a year or 2 years, and you'll have some other amazing experience under your belt because of it. And then finally, I will say that there are, in the interest of, there are multiple avenues into television. There are more now than ever, and I know it's a cliche, but it used to be that there were only a few entryways into the industry, and now we have people being hired off YouTube and social media, things that they're doing, and people are going out and making their own films on iPhones and getting horror movie deals, and there are lots of things. And taking Micah's advice to heart, don't do things as a stepping stone, but do things that you're excited about and you're excited to share with the world, however you want to share them, or however you want to, whether it's writing or filmmaking or anything. And you throw enough seeds onto the ground, and something's going to sprout.
Yeah. There's another little story. Minaru got her first PA job thanks to her bartender brother talking to a producer who came in to the restaurant. So if you're cool, if you're friendly, if you're nice, if your brother is evidently, that can lead to all kinds of things. Chris, are you down for a fan theory? A How I Met Your Mother fan theory question?
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think about the yellow and purple theory from How I Met Your Mother? How seeing yellow means Ted is getting closer to meeting his wife, while purple means getting somewhere with Robin. Are you familiar with this? Have you heard of this, Chris?
This is so embarrassing that I have not read about this. I feel like it's a little familiar, so maybe I've heard it, but I don't know of it. But I can obviously, you've got Yellow Umbrella. Purple Giraffe was the second episode of the.
And there was the horn. What wasn't there like a?
There was a blue French horn, which I guess
I don't know how that
sort of purplish or in the purple family. I think it's awesome. I mean, one of the great delights of getting to be on a show that has a fan base and runs for so long is watching watching how much it means to people, like not just in terms of emotionally, but also stuff like this where people are really thinking about it. And I would love to say that, yes, it was all planned by us. So yes, it was all planned by us.
There you go. You just cracked it open here. You heard it here. Chris Harris, executive producer of How I Met Your Mother, confirms the yellow and purple theory. You can print your articles about that on the fan blogs. All right, here's a question. Do my pilots need to be packed with belly laughs? I think this kind of ties into what we were talking about, types of comedy earlier. Yeah. And I think the simple answer for this, if it's a comedy and that's what it's going for, you need to deliver whatever it is, right?
That's great. That's a great way to say it. Yeah. Deliver on the promise of what it should be.
Yeah.
I will also say, if you are, I in terms of advice for folks, I always love talking about and I always say physical piles of scripts because that's how old I am. Like when I started reading writers, we were actually delivered piles of scripts, and now it's obviously all PDFs. But think about your pilots or your specs place in that huge group of files that a reader has gotten, whether it's someone at an agency or a network or reading a showrunner reading to be hired. And again, never do anything that doesn't feel natural to you. Never do anything that feels like you're doing it purely strategically. But think about your spec among all those other specs. And I will say that it is rare to find, because it's really difficult. It's rare to find a half hour that actually makes me laugh on the first page or two, because either it's going to feel false or it's going to feel too big. You don't know the characters yet. It's hard to find the situation. If you can accomplish that in a natural way, that's a huge leg up, but it's really difficult. And so something to think about.
Chris, we've come to the end of our time. I want to thank you so much. Is there any final advice or words of wisdom you want to share with our audience here?
No, I've used it all up.
Nothing to say to you guys. Chris
Phil's Coffee on Ventura is a wonderful place to work. There you go.
There you go. Awesome. Fantastic. That's the secret to success. I want to thank everyone for coming, for asking your questions. Sorry I couldn't get to everything today, but it's fantastic. I'm so glad there's great energy. Chris,
thank you much. Such a treat.
Yeah, for joining and sharing your wisdom. I just remind everybody, if you want to write with me on Wednesdays at 1 p.m., Let's Write Scripts. You can RSVP to it. There's a link in the description below. Every Wednesday at 1 p.m., we do timed writing sprints. I answer screenwriting questions. It's a ton of fun. Take care of yourselves, everyone. Happy writing. And thanks for being here. Chris, again, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night.